Econ 101, Chapter 9 is getting us into macroeconomics and talking about starting us off talking about the mixed economy of the United States. Now, what a mixed economy generally means is that the private sector, um, as well as government, work together to have certain responsibilities in the overall economy. In our system, roughly 3/4 of the economy is guided by private sector markets, and about a quarter is guided by government, roughly. It varies over time, but we've been right in that range between 75–80% market driven, 20 to 25% government driven for the past several decades. It's not particularly changed that much. Since the financial crisis, we saw a slight uptick in government spending, but since '09 things have leveled off, and total government spending now stands around $3.6–3.7 trillion per year, out of a roughly $16–17 trillion economy. Comes up to about 23–24%. The first part of the chapter has a brief discussion about income inequality, which is an important topic. And it poses the question whether income inequality is a problem in society. If you look at Table 9.1 on page 202, it shows us that in 2010, which is essentially the same numbers today, the top 20% earn about half of the money income, household income in the United States, and the bottom 80% earn about the other half. If you break it down to the bottom 20, they only earn about a little over 3% of the total money income. So the poorest 20% earn roughly 3% of the income. The richest 20% earn about half or 50% of the total income. And the question that they pose before us ask, is that a problem? And in fact we do think it is some type of problem, then you get into the very deep philosophical discussion of income redistribution in society, in which we take money away through taxation from some groups and give it to other groups. Now, monetary or income redistribution is something that we've been doing for decades. It's nothing new. The real question today is whether we want to increase the level of redistribution or decrease the level of redistribution. That's where most of our political or policy debates lie in the U.S. They touch on a few general reasons for why we see some income inequality in the U.S. and around the world, and they list things like globalization and trade, where we have become a globalized society. Much of our manufacturing in the U.S., therefore much of the middle class, has been displaced. In some cases, they've dropped out of the labor force and they're not working at all. In other cases, people have learned new skills and trades to get the new jobs for the new century, and perhaps even relocated to take on new work. Obviously, that's related very closely to technological change in the past several decades, how that's dramatically changed the world around us. Also, they mention the fact that we have a very few individuals that make an extraordinary amount of money, and we have then a lot in the middle and a lot that are poor. So some people in certain industries can in fact make hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, in terms of income and wealth. And then the last characteristic they mention for income inequality is immigration, and how our immigration system is broken, and how it to an extent contributes to some income inequality through affecting wages in the labor market. Then the section goes on and talks about household behavior and consumers, and that consumers attribute through their spending make up about 70% of the economy. Consumers really do two basic things. We spend or demand goods and services through our purchases, but we also work to produce those services. The business sector gets mentioned, accounts for about 15% of the overall economy. Businesses are important obviously because they hire workers, provide the employment, and then they also supply goods and services to society. and then also make investments in research and development and different things. And then the mixed economy is really focusing on the government and how the government is a partner with the economy. The government, as I mentioned earlier, accounts for about roughly 24% of the economy today, and is a major player in terms of all the vast programs that are involved today. Even things as healthcare rely at least to some degree on government, at least to ensure that people have coverage, although the healthcare system is still primarily market driven. And then, of course, your local and state governments are important players as well. The discussion on government also touches very briefly on budgeting, talks a little bit about the impact of debt and deficits. We'll talk about that later in the course. But if we're spending about 24%, we're only taxing people at a rate of about 18% in terms of the federal national economy. And it's no reason to see why we have a public debt or national debt of about $17 trillion. We're not taking in enough money to cover our expenses. So naturally you're going to have a debt. Two choices there. We could eliminate the debt either by cutting spending fairly dramatically. We could achieve that over time, and then pay the debt down. If we cut our yearly spending, we could also raise taxes to cover it, a combination of the two, or we could continue to do what we've been doing, and simply policymakers don't seem to think debt's that big of a problem, and just let it go as it's been going and slowly increase over time. There's really good debates on both sides of the debt argument. One argument is that debt is very important and matters, and that it's harmful for the future. The other argument is that public debt largely doesn't matter, especially if the economy or GDP is growing faster than debt. Then we're able to shoulder a larger and larger debt load. The chapter finishes off talking a little bit about taxes. Three main types of taxes. Any tax is going to be proportional, progressive, or regressive. And then it talks a little bit about our federal income tax, which is currently progressive. The more you make, the higher percent you pay at the margin, which is important at the marginal rates. And there's many proposals over the past few years to replace our current progressive income tax system, either with a proportional system that would be a flat tax, or even a regressive system that would be an example of a national sales tax or a consumption tax. So it is a good chapter, a rich chapter. I hope that you read through it and get a good introduction into macroeconomics, as this really sets the stage for the chapters to come in terms of economic growth or GDP, measuring unemployment in the labor market, and also measuring prices in terms of the inflation rate, which are the three key macro variables that we'll look at: economic growth, unemployment rate, and inflation rate. So that's chapter 9. Let me know if you have any questions.